The time now is Hot Rod Deluxe 30. All right, I'm going to speed this one up so it doesn't take forever. I mean, it takes a long time to do. Here, I'm just going ahead and snipping all the things that need to be snipped. For instance, the zip ties, capacitor leads for the filter caps. I didn't desolder that. I just snipped one end. It was totally loose on the inside. Yeah, that can happen. It happens a lot in these. So I've got everything snipped that's going to come out, taking off the knobs, going to take off the washers that hold the pots in place and the jacks in place. Boy, this goes a lot faster at this rate. I wish I could do it this fast in real life. It would be nice. Oh, here comes some voiceover recorded as I did it. The output jack was totally loose to begin with. Not too uncommon. Happens a lot in fenders, especially the reissues, but also the hot rods and blues. Taking the screws out here. Gonna get the board out, but there's a problem. Look at the problem. See the problem? Here's the problem. All right, on this one, the reverb wires are too tight to pull the board all the way down. I've got to get in there and loosen that. It's hard to do without pulling the chassis, but I'm gonna try. I just got to remember to put that back together when I'm done with a little slack built in. All right, pulling the board out, and we can now see. All right, as predicted, this board is all toasted. All those 5-watt components, the resistors and the Zener diodes, have totally roasted this part of the board. And there will be people in the comment section, there always are, saying, hey, mine's fine, I never had no lick trouble with mine, blah, 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 fender, blah, 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 you know what. By the time you can see it from the other side, the damage has already happened. It takes a while for it to be visible from the other side, but I'd say probably 8 out of 10 of those who think their amp is just fine already have this problem started. And by the time they admit that their amp does have this problem, it might be an expensive thing. Any criticism I have of a major company, whether it's Fender or Marshall, you name it, people dismiss anything I say because brand loyalty or justify their purchase, or mysteriously things always get really great reviews online and in magazines. It's funny how that works. When you pay the reviewer, you get really nice results. But, if you ask me, if you ask any tech who's been doing this a while, you get a Hot Rod series amp in, you know it's this. There may be some other things too. The input jacks and the pots like to desolder, or the solder joints like to break. The screen grid resistors are often a problem. The plate resistors and the phase inverter are often a problem. But 9 times out of 10, this area is either toasted like this or on its way. Here's that diode that was loose on the other side. See it wiggle right there? Try to grab it. It's rotated. That pad is totally broken off from the trace. So let me see what I can do to salvage this. All right, so the first thing to do is to flow a little bit of fresh solder to the old solder, remind it that it is solder, add some flux, using the braid to gently get it off without damaging the pads any more than they're already damaged. And you gotta get all the little bits off and get all the component leads out without doing any more damage. And I think next I'm gonna get some, isopropyl, get some flux off. Then I'm looking at the damaged area. It's pretty well scorched. Just getting a little bit more off there, so I have a nice clean place. And there's the old caps are out, because they get baked. Now I'm in here removing the conformal coating off the copper traces so that I can put in some bus wire and the leads of the new components, and I have a lot of good surface area. So instead of going to a very small pad on the board, I'm doing a pretty good length of trace. It's a lot more surface area, and what the components don't bridge all by themselves, I will add a little bit more bus wire as necessary to make sure everything can handle the stuff. There I'm showing the test fitting and getting the new component off the board, about a 1/2 inch. That's about 12 millimeters. And here I'm going to be kinking the leads of the new components so that they have some mechanical support, so there won't be stress on these already stressed out pads and traces. This takes a lot longer than I'd like. It would take very little time for the machines to do this to begin with if Fender actually gave a damn about their customers, but you know, what can you do? So here I'm soldering the wires of the new components to the pads, where the pads still exist, and to those exposed copper traces. And I'm getting as good a mechanical support as I can, both from the leads going to those copper traces and from the crimping on the other side. And talk about something there, not doing anything, and now I'm going to crimp the 5-watt resistors the exact same way. The goal is to give them some structural support, that the solder is not holding their whole weight, and to make sure that there's a good 1/2 inch of airflow between the board and the new component body, and that the leads are long enough that some of the heat dissipates through the lead length. And you know, this is never going to be beautiful at this point, but it will actually be structurally better than it was when it was new, because I'm using component leads and 20 gauge bus wire, and it's going to be very solid, much more solid, a lot more metal than the original traces had. All right, and the end result of all that nonsense is we have components mounted off the board for airflow that have a pretty good mechanical support. All right, time for the capacitors. These are 105-degree rated capacitors. 20 degrees may not seem like a lot, but that's 20 degrees Celsius. These are rated for much longer life than the originals. I'm just doing the same thing with these component leads as I did with the resistors and diodes. Just trying to reinforce everything, get everything strong. All right. We now have a non-beautiful, but much more reliable and functional low voltage power supply. Very rarely will these caps also need to be changed. This amp's not old enough that I don't think it's necessary. They're away from the sources of heat. But these, like I said, are just nuked, baked by these two. All the heat that does this to a board is fiendish on these caps. I'm going to take a break, go outside, stretch my legs, and then we'll do the filter caps and start putting this back together. To get the caps out, it's pretty much the same process. First, I want to remind the old solder that it is in fact solder with flux. All right, so I'm just doing the same process. Then I'm pulling the leads out, pushing them through, no stress to the pads. Gonna get all the old leads out, and then I'll go through and get all the old solder off. Look at me go. Gosh, I'm quick. I'm just so darn good at this. I'm 10 times better in this video than I am in real life. At least 10 times faster. Getting the old flux off with isopropyl. And I'm using a razor blade to get the old silicone off the board. Now I'm pre-bending the leads of the new F&T caps. They're much higher quality than the IC brand caps. They cost about $1 more each. Now I'm putting the silicone, fresh silicone in place to hold them, and I'm doing a 90-degree crimp on the wires, the leads off these new capacitors. And then before soldering, I will snip off the excess leads so that I'm not going to stress out the solder joints when I snip them. Then I resolder them and I make sure they're all good. Then I feel myself getting paper towel ready for some reason. I must have missed this one. Ah, yes, just getting dust off the top panel. It's a little things. Doesn't make any difference electronically. But you know, if you pay someone to work on your amp and you get it back and it's just as ugly as you had it, you know, it's not a good feeling. So I take the time to go in there and do a little housekeeping. This is just a dry paper towel, and I'm using a small screwdriver to work into the nooks and crannies. On seriously messed up ones, I'll use WD-40, but this was a dry job. All right, there's some damage here. This other resistor, in stock form, it's a 2 watt. They installed a 5 watt ceramic, and they boogered up the traces when they did it, and it was not reliable. So I've got to undo that and redo it properly. So getting the old one out. All right, I have determined that the damage to the board somewhat from the original heat on this resistor, and certainly by the not very good repair, has made the original stuff here unreliable. And what this was doing was putting a resistor, an 820 ohm 2 watt resistor, between this point where I marked it on the board and this point where I marked it on the board. And the connection right here, you can't see, also needs to go to here. Now, here's one point on the board, and I can follow this trace back, and there's another spot one of these traces right here. I can expose the copper there and run a resistor from here to here on the underside of the board. I think that's going to be the best we can hope for with a realistic budget. And then I'll run a wire from here to over here. And that should take care of it. Is it lovely? No. It will have very little stress on it. It'll be elevated like the other 5 watt stuff for better heat. And I think it'll be just fine. It's going to be a low mass resistor. Let me get that prepped and done. All right, it is not the loveliest work I've ever done. It's not the quality of work I like to do. Given the issues this amp has, this was the quality of work that gets it working again and should be fairly reliable. There's no strain on these. That's why I did a fairly large surface area. This will handle the heat just fine. It's off the board for dissipation. It's very low mass. Should be no problems with this. At some point, Hail Marys are all we're left with. Let me take care of 1 or 2 more things before we put this back together. All right, someone replaced original screen grid resistors with these 2 or 3 watts. I guess they're 3 watts, mounted top side. But the body of the resistor is up against the traces, which are carrying other signals, and there's no airflow, bad heat dissipation again. So they remove the old problem, put in a new problem. So these are going to go away. All right, it appears that the previous tech was working too hot or not hot enough, and this pad and this pad lifted. And that's not something to trust a screen trace to. This connection right here is still fine, as is this one. I'm not going to touch that one because it can get some strain from the ribbon connection. But we're going to make use of the fact that it's just the one feed from the screen supply to this entire area. And we can do the same thing on here that is done on Marshalls and real Fenders. All right, taking advantage of the fact that pin 6 on this amp is unused and not connected to anything. Got new screen grid resistors going from pin 6 to pin 4 on each, hardwired. This should be reliable. Is it lovely? No. No one's going to see it when you're playing the amp. Will it work? Yes. Will it work well? Yes. Will it work better than original? To a large degree, yeah. This is a better way to go. It's not the most elegant way to do it, but it certainly works. Now, one of the things I want to bend these down a little bit now that they're in place, because I got to have the main board slide in just a little bit off to the side like that should do, being mindful of these screws. I could have done this wire shorter, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to interfere with these screws should this board ever need to come out. Let me put it all back together now and we'll see if the problems are gone. All right, it's back together, but not all the way together. I never put them all the way together until I'm sure that everything is working as I want. Let's take it out of standby. And the first thing I want to do is confirm that we have voltages where we ought to have voltages. Let's check these screen grid resistors. Yeah, 432. 432. I've got a current limiter on, so the voltage is going to be a little bit low. At the plate, I get anything at that plate, but I get 434 at the quick connect. That should be going to that plate. What about this plate? Nothing at that plate. 434 at the quick connect. Maybe sometimes this solder in these things, sorry about hitting the tripod, close quarters though, it doesn't look like it in the video. Sometimes it's hard to touch. It's 2, that's why. 3, 430. Yeah, okay, the plate's good. So let's check the bias. 6 millivolts, where I should be getting 60. Negative 44 at each grid. So, and I heard stuff crackling, so you should have some sound. The bias is in its normal range. Maybe that these groove tubes, 6L6s, just aren't happy. Let's see what it sounds like. The reverb's working. Let's go into the effects return, the power amp in, which uses the low voltage supply as well. That's all normal. So the power amp tubes are suspect. Now the original complaint this amp had when it came in was the drive channel doesn't work. And indeed it does not. So let me put it back in standby for a minute. I'm going to see if we just have a bad triode on 1/2 of V2. Because 1/2 of V2 is only used for the drive channel, not for the clean channel. This is probably the original groove tubes that's in there. I happen to have another one right here for test purposes. Before I worry about anything major in the amp, I want to make sure that the tube isn't just bad. That's really loose in the socket though. Yeah, so the only thing that's wrong with the drive channel, let me check the more gain too. Yeah, it's working. Turn the master down for that. There's a bad tube. Now there's some gronk when I adjust the volume on the guitar. That could be leaking DC. So let's see what's going on with V1 as well, which is also an old groove tubes. Let's see, I got a Mesa here. Why is that so loose in that socket? Let's see if I splay the pins out a little bit, if it gets better. It may be a bad socket. I hope not. As much work as this amp has already needed. That's a lot better. All right, so with a different tube in V1, not only has the DC gone away, got a bit more gain, but the entire amp's output is much lower than it should be. See, I've got this on about 4 on the volume. And that should be loud enough that it should be unpleasant to be around. So let's take these 6L6s out and put in another pair and see what's up. All right, I wish I had done this on camera, but a good clue that these tubes may not be happy or healthy is that this amp's been on for 10 minutes before I did this. And I used a paper towel to pull these 6L6s out, but I didn't need to. I'm just holding them in my hand. If these things had been drawing the amount of current that they should be drawing, I would be burning the hell out of myself right now. So I put these in here. And let's see. I've got a pair of generic Schwagang 6L6s from an ignator, that Renegade, that needs so much help. I'm going to put these in here, and we'll use it as a way to test these tubes, as well as test the amp. See if the bias goes up, if the output level goes up, all that fun stuff. And if these tubes are bad, then I'll know. But they didn't blow the fuses, at least in the other amp, in the ignitor. So let's power this on. And remember, I've got the current limiter going, so if these tubes are bad, it won't be blowing fuses. Speaking of which, real fast, let's make sure this has the correct fuse in the amp. The fuse holder's loose. I'll tighten that up in the process. Should be a 3 amp fuse in here. And it is. That's good. Let me pause this for a second. Sorry about that. I couldn't get to the current limiter with the tripod where it was. Just going to get in here and tighten up this fuse holder if I can. Because it's really loose. And I wanted to make sure there were no mains power going to it before I played around with the fuse, because that would, before the switch, so it would have had power to it. If I can get in here with this, I may need to go to a different tool. There we go. Turn the mains power back on. Still with a current limiter. Power the amp on. Get it out of my way. Bring it out of standby. Watch for any lights show from the current limiter. Seems okay. Turn the volume down, reverb down. Oh shit, duh. Of course it seems okay. I forgot to put the fuse back in place. All right, so let's power it on. I've got the volume and reverb levels off. We're on the clean channel. I want to have no signal going to the output right now. I've got the current limiter on. Take it out of standby. No big surge. The amp has more white noise than it had before, and the heaters are more obvious on these Ignator branded tubes than they were on the originals. And let's see what I'm measuring at the bias checkpoint now. It was at 6 millivolts. Now it's at 50. All right, yeah, we had some bad 6L6s. I'm not gonna set the bias fully with these because it's artificially low right now because of the current limiter, and these are not the tubes that'll go home in the amp. But this should be much, much louder now. And I bet if I were to play at 4 now, it would just clip the hell out of the mic. All right, I got some pots that need to be cleaned, but other than that, I turn the reverb up to a crazy level we would never use and find my little tapping pointer tool. Here it is. All right, those aren't at all loose. The new 5-watt components in that damaged area. All right, this amp is on the path to being healthy. So it needs two 12AX7s, two 6L6s. I'll ask the owner if he wants me to get all three preamp tubes, so just as a totally new set. The amp's been totally recapped as far as the filter caps go. All the stuff in the low voltage supply has been changed out. The heat damage has been mitigated and should not recur. So this amp will, and once I clean the pots and put it all back together and all that stuff, it will sound better than new. So, you know, is it worth it? It depends. This is going to be about a $400 repair, given all the extra stuff that I had to do. And that then plus the cost of tubes. So let's say $550. You cannot buy an amp like this for $550. And the amp in the condition it came in was worthless because the tubes were bad. The speaker in this is not much to write home about. So you would have to go buy a brand new amp. And you're not going to get an amp that does what this one does now for $550. And this is in better than new condition, even though cosmetically on the inside, you know, it still has the discoloration from the heat. That's not going to happen anymore. You know, this is can be sensible. I'm sorry that it turned out to be so much. It's because it took so long before the repair was done. Remember earlier in the video when I snipped out one lead for that diode, the diode was just free spinning. You know, it had never been soldered for a long time. Whoever had done this bad repair over in this area should have done all this stuff at the same time and maybe wouldn't have gotten this bad. And as far as the tubes go, that's just bad luck.